So let's start working on that shopping list form. As mentioned, I want to use the template-driven approach. So in the shopping list added component here, we already got our form element up here. Now Angular will already take control over this, and we already got the forms module added in app module by default. We of course will need this too. So with the form here, we now can start working on our form controls. I will get rid of these local references. I will no longer use that approach. I will also get rid of the click listener on the add button. Instead, I want to use ng submit to submit the form and then call on add item here. I also will get access to the form created by Angular. And as you learned, we can get access by placing a local reference on the form element. And now this would give us access to the form element itself. But by setting this equal to ngForm, we get access to this JavaScript object Angular created behind the scenes. And now we can simply pass this object to this onAddItem method. So that is how we can submit the form, but we also should register some controls. We got a couple of controls here. Let's start with the first one. Here on the name control, I will assign a name, so the name attribute of name. So a lot of names here, but of course the name between the quotation marks is the name of the property we'll later have in this form object Angular created. And I will assign ngModel to this input so that we register it as a control in our template-driven form. Now for the second input, the name will be amount, and then I'll also add ngModel and make sure that you import it from forms module, otherwise this is not available. So we should have this control added to our form too. And the add button here will submit the form because it's the only button of type submit. The other two buttons are of type button. So in onAddItem in this TypeScript file now, I no longer will use my element refs here. So I can remove these declarations here. I can get rid of the viewChild and element ref import, and I can get rid of these two lines where I extract the data. I still want to create a new ingredient, but now we will simply get the form here, and it will be of ngForm, so of this type. Since this is the form, we will get the value of the form on the value property. Now we can simply use the value and access name to get the name of the ingredient and value amount to get the amount, because name and amount were the names we specified here in our template on these input elements. Well, let's see if this works. If I save this and we go back to the shopping list, ngStirf is still running. Here, if I add bread, 1, that looks good. Works like before, but now using the better approach of using the built-in tools and therefore building a better form. Now we can also take advantage of validation and so on, and that is something I will do in the next lecture. In the last lecture, we registered our controls and we made our form submittable. So that is what we did then. We can still use that form. Now I want to add validation. For example, the name should be required. This must not be empty. And the same for our number. Now it should be a number, and due to the fact that this input is of type number, it should already be hard to enter anything else. So with this, we now added some validation. Now to take advantage of this, I want to disable the add button if the form is invalid. So we'll bind to disabled here and we'll disable it if form is not valid, if this is true. So if this check here is true, and this will be true if the form is not valid. So let's save this, and this looks good. I can't click the add button. Now let's try again. Let's insert something into amount. This works. Of course, a negative amount works too though. So an easy way of making sure that we may only enter numbers greater than 0 is to use another built-in validator, the pattern validator. This will check the user input against a regular expression. Now, the regular expression achieving what we're looking for would be the following one, which needs to be pasted between single quotation marks, so as a string. It's this one. Since it's a string, we can also omit these single quotation marks and omit the squared brackets to use the shortcut of using property binding when binding to a string where we don't have to use the squared brackets. So what this will basically do, this regular expression, it will allow any number greater than 0. So we can see this in action if we now save this and go back to the application. If I add bread and 1, this is valid, -1 doesn't work, -10 doesn't work, -0, 1 doesn't work, +0, 1 does work, 10 does work, and 0 does also not work. So it does exactly what I wanted to do. So now we added validation to this input field. Now let's make sure that once we click one of the existing items, we actually load that item so that we can edit it. So, time to make our items editable by clicking them. In our shopping list component, where we have our items, I want to add a click listener to the item so that we, can click it. Here, I want to call onAddedItem, of course any name you like. Simply copy it. Now here though, I also want to get the ID of the ingredient, and I need the ID so that I'm later able to replace the correct one in the array of ingredients which is managed in a service. So let's extract the ID like this, I equals index, to get the, index of the current iteration, and let's pass it here as an argument. Now I can copy this name and go into my TypeScript code. Here I want to add onAddedItem. And I know that I will get the index here, which will be a number. And now there are a couple of ways of getting this information, this index, to the shopping added component, which is in the end where I want to get it to, because that is where we are editing. I will use the service, or specifically a subject in that service, to which I can listen in the shopping added component. So I will add a new subject in the shopping list service, and that I'll name started editing. Sounds like a fitting name. It'll be a new subject, and subject is a generic type. It will hold a number in the end. That's all I need to change here. With this subject created in onAddedItem, I can reach out to the shopping list service, which we already inject, and then use started editing and emit a new value, my index, which will make sure that now we pass on this index to our subject for now so that we can listen to it in some other place. That other place is going to be in the shopping added component. Here in ng-oninit, this sounds like a good place to do the listening. I'm already injecting the shopping list service. So here I will subscribe to my started editing subject. And of course I should clean up this subscription if we destroy this component, so I will store it in a property named subscription, which is of type subscription, which I should import from rxjs subscription, and I'll move up both these imports here to the top of the file. So with that, we got our subscription property. As I just said, I want to store my subscription in this property. And now I will implement onDestroy. Therefore, you should import this interface from @AngularCore. And then also implement ng-ondestroy to clean up this subscription, just to be sure that you don't create a memory leak. So that's the cleanup work, but what should happen inside of this? Well, here we know that we will receive the number of the item we're about to edit. And this will be triggered whenever we submit the started editing information. We also know something else. We only get here into this anonymous function if started editing was triggered, so if we are editing. So that is an important information when it comes to what we should do once the form is submitted. Should we create a new item or edit an existing one? So I want to store the mode we're in here in a property. I'll name it edit mode, and by default it's false. Here, however, I will set edit mode to true, because we are editing, right? So with this, we now get the index and we are editing. I also want to store the index of the item we're editing. So edited item Index could be a property name, it will be a number in the end, and it will get initialized here. Edited item index will be the index we're getting here as an argument. So with that we got a lot of important information. Now with that information, I want to load the item we're about to edit. So that is something I'll do in the next lecture. In the last lectures, we did a lot of setup to get the information about the item we're about to edit. Now let's edit it. I want to get the item we want to edit, and for this, in the shopping list service, I'll need a new method, which is simply getIngredient, which expects to get the index, a number, and which will simply return us the ingredient from our ingredients array, so the ingredient at this index. So with that returned, we now can reach out to this new method in our shopping edit component and store it in the edited item maybe, which is an ingredient, so of type ingredient. And we do this whenever we get a new information that we're in the edit mode, I should say. So here, edited item will be set equal to, reaching out to the shopping service, to the item we get from the getIngredient method. And here we simply pass our index. So with this we got a lot of information here. Now we need to update our form if we are in edit mode. And for this I want to get access to the form. Now on the form we do have a local reference, f. We can use this together with @viewChild to get access to it. So here I will actually use @viewChild and make sure to add the import from @AngularCore. I will reach out to f, and this will be the shopping list form of type ngForm. So make sure to assign this type here. Now, once we got all the new information inside of the subscribe callback, and that is of course important, outside of there, this will not be run each time we get a new information, but it might be run before we got any information at all. So outside would be wrong. Inside of this callback here, I want to reach out to my form and call setValue here. And now I want to assign a new value. For the name, I will use my edited item, and here the name. And for amount, you guessed it, I'll also use my edited item and then the amount. And this should make sure that whenever we select a new item, we actually populate the form with the right values. We can already try this with ngServe running. Once our page reloads, if I click here, we indeed select the correct item. So that is working as expected. Now, of course, it still adds it as a new item, so we need to make sure that if we are editing, we correctly rename this button to update or something like this, and that we then also do update the item and don't add a new one. Let's do this in the next lecture.